Greetings everyone. In this video session we'll speak about button-based triggered animation. Now the name seems very jazzy and to some extent a little complex, but wait till I show you an example and it'll be crystal clear. In the next slide, I have two buttons on the left hand side. One is perfume, one is cosmetics. Now, when I'm making a presentation before the board, I would want that when I click on the first button on the left, the sales figures for perfume product line should come up on my screen. When I click on the gray button, immediately similar thing happens for cosmetics. Now if I click back on the orange button, see it fades back. Now imagine if you learn this technique and you have variety of products, or you may be showing sales for different regions. At the click of a button, you can control the presentation and thus the flow of the discussion during the board meetings. This is what we are going to achieve. This was a sample and let me show you from scratch what are the things and techniques involved to achieve this. First, let me go to a blank slide. I will create a dummy chart. So I go to insert, I go to chart. I pick up the default one. Once this appears before my screen, just to keep it simple in the first level of application, I am deleting this blue bar and keeping it simple only to two series categories. Now, keeping in mind the color combination, let me also keep two shapes which are of same colors, that is orange and gray. So I go to shapes, I go to click on the rectangle, draw one, I go to shape outline, make sure there is no outline and change one color as orange. Now you might be wondering, how do I ensure that the color of orange matches with that of chart? Now if you're starting afresh, you might not get this in the recently used color palette. So how do I proceed? I will go to the eyedropper, click on this orange, immediately turns to the same shade of orange. Now let me replicate that, and if you remember our discussion from the previous video, I can keep Shift Control pressed, holding this shape and drag one of the replica down. Immediately I go to shape fill, pick up the eyedropper and click on this gray. So immediately I have two shapes which will be acting like buttons. Now let me just feed in some basic data inside it. So first one is going to be dedicated to perfume. Second one, I dedicate that to cosmetics. Fine. Now when I proceed with animation, one challenge that you will be facing is that you can create animation based on chart. You may add animation based on fade or fly in. The point is there are limitations with animation when you're applying so on an integrated chart. Let me show you why. If I go to animation pane, if I start playing this animation, it appears at one go. Alternatively, if I go to the effect options and try to break it apart under the fade chart animation tab, you'll notice the only option I have is by series, by category, by elements in series and category. Even if I apply one of these, notice it happens one by one in this way, or maybe series wise, but I also want to enable this animation using a trigger based button. So how do I proceed? Let me press Ctrl Z and get me back to the original chart set. Now I'll be utilizing one technique which I have explained in the previous video. So I select this entire chart area, I cut it using Ctrl X. Now although I can use a shortcut key Ctrl Alt V, but I will show you that I need to go to paste special. Ctrl Alt V will also enable the paste special button. My intention is to make sure this is pasted as an enhanced meta file, and let me ungroup it twice. If you want to know more about the details of this technique, you might look at our earlier videos. Let me ungroup it once more. And the moment I do so, you notice the bubbles surrounding these chart elements indicate that they have been broken down into individual components. Now comes the trick part. I choose this orange bar, and just for the sake of testing, if I delete it, only that orange bar diagram gets away. So now I will be applying animation to this orange bar. This is no more a chart element. These are a collection of elements which may be shapes grouped together. Same goes for gray and orange, and also these lines. So although to a user it might look like a chart, but these are actually elements now converted to shape. So I click on this orange diagram, I go to animation, and then I intend to add an animation using fade option. But the point is, I also intend to add a trigger point. That means when I click on a particular button, only then this animation should begin. So I naturally go to this trigger option. This was also there in 2010, but not in 2007 version of PowerPoint. So I go to trigger on click of what? Now this is one area where people face problem. They are confused that which rectangle number corresponds with the orange one on my left hand side. To solve this matter, let me take you to Home tab. On the extreme right hand side, a button which you may not have used before, it's called Select. And within that, let me go to Selection pane. What it does is, in the entire slide, whatever the number of elements of charts, objects, shapes or picture exist, it shows you them list by list. Now, if you happen to choose the first shape on the left, in the list, automatically rectangle 5 is chosen. So I can rename it. Let me rename it by perfume. And let me choose the gray one. Let me rename this also as a similar one. It's a Cosmo. Enter. Now, once I close the selection pane, let me go back and choose this orange bar diagram. Animation. Correct. Let me click on the animation pane just to ensure that the previous animation, if any, has to be removed. I do not want to remove the element. I just want to remove the animation. So I right click and say remove. Now once I've chosen the orange bar, I go to add animation, I click on fade, and at the same time I go to trigger on click of what? On click of perfume. This is what we had named just a minute back, so I click on perfume. Similarly, I click on the gray bar diagram, I add animation, I go to fade. We are adding continuously different set of animation to the different objects. Now let me go to the second one, which is the gray one, and let me ensure the click trigger is Cosmo. So now this was about entry. I also want an exit option where if I click on the button of orange, it should go back. Hence. Again, I choose the orange one. This time I add an animation, but I ensure that I choose not entrance, not emphasis. I choose the exit part fade. It's indicated in red. I click on fade. And once having done so, let me also check on the trigger point on click of what? On click of the button called perfume. Let me repeat the same for the cosmetics bar diagram. I choose the gray one, add animation. I scroll down amongst the many options of exit. I choose fade, one of the most professional ones, and trigger point, I make it Cosmo. So I can see green and red. Mouse icon indicates click, and green indicates entry, and naturally red indicates exit. So now let me run the presentation to see whether it works fine. I click on the slideshow. This is the practice area where we had created this entire structure. I click on the orange, I click on it back, it fades in, fades out. I click on the cosmetics, gray in, gray out. If I want to keep both, I'll click on both these options. So couple of things in mind, that first you are going to use the home selection pane to be able to name these objects for easy identification. Secondly, the trick that we had applied to break down a particular chart element was that you may cut it, you may go to paste special and use enhanced meta file. Once having done so, you might right click and go to ungroup twice. This will give you a generic message to which you must press yes. Once more, group, ungroup. So after having done so, then you apply animation and keep the animation pane in front of your screen to be able to see clearly what is happening in the background. So go ahead and practice it. The file that will be given to you along with this video also have these steps mentioned in brief. So hints are given at the bottom. Go ahead and amaze your colleagues the next day you join the office. See you till then.